Right after she got her diploma, my daughter said, "Proud you raised me. I spent my whole life wishing anyone else had, just not you." I set the flowers down gently, walked out of that auditorium with my chin up, and didn't look back. One sentence that cut through every illusion I'd been carrying. Yes, it wounded me deeply. What loving father wouldn't feel that blade? But here's the thing about wounds. Sometimes they're exactly what you need to finally see clearly. I was grateful for that moment of perfect honesty, and now it was time to show her just how grateful I could be. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories. My chest swelled with a pride so fierce it bordered on pain as I watched her fidget in that cap and gown. 22 years, and here we were. Graduation day. My little girl. The thought pulsed through me like a heartbeat as I adjusted my position in the cramped auditorium seat, trying to catch her eye. Beautiful day for this, isn't it? The mother beside me beamed, clutching her program. Which one's yours? Third row, blonde hair peeking out from under the cap. I couldn't help the grin spreading across my face. Business degree with honors, I'm bursting. She followed my gaze. Oh, she's lovely. You must be so proud. Proud. The words settled in my bones like warmth. I raised my hand slightly, hoping she'd spot me in the sea of faces. For just a moment, our eyes met across the distance. I smiled, waved, but she looked away so quickly I wondered if I'd imagined the connection. They grow up so fast, another father chimed in from behind me. Feels like yesterday I was teaching mine to ride a bike. Baseball for us, I said, still watching her. Every Saturday morning at the park, rain or shine. She used to wait by the door with her glove, bouncing on her toes. I lifted my phone, snapped a photo as she shifted in her seat. She seemed tense, nervous, probably. Big moment. The dean approached the podium, and my heart hammered as names began flowing. Each step closer to hers felt like Christmas morning stretched into eternity. I found myself leaning forward, phone ready, flowers purchased that morning still fresh in my lap, white roses, her favorite since she was 7. Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, there she is. I rose half out of my seat, applauding harder than anyone around me as she walked across that stage. The woman next to me chuckled at my enthusiasm, but I didn't care. This was my moment too. All those parent-teacher conferences, late-night homework sessions, college application stress, tuition payments that stretched our budget thin but never felt like sacrifice because it was for her. She accepted the diploma with trembling hands, and when the dean gestured toward the microphone for her brief graduate speech, I saw her shoulders tighten. My protective instincts flared. She'd always hated public speaking. But she stepped forward anyway, my brave girl. "Thank you," she began, voice shaky. "This degree represents everything I've achieved through my own courage and determination. I'm grateful to myself for never giving up, for staying focused when everything around me was difficult." Her eyes swept the crowd, and I waved again, hoping to ground her with my presence. But when her gaze found mine this time, something cold flickered across her features. "Usually, graduates thank their parents at moments like this," she continued, voice gaining confidence that somehow felt menacing. "But I believe gratitude should be earned, not assumed." The pause that followed felt like the world holding its breath. So instead, I'm grateful that despite having a father who never deserved that title, I managed to become who I am today. Honestly, I spent my whole life wishing anyone else had raised me, just not you, Dad. The words hit the auditorium like a thunderclap of silence. Parents around me shifted uncomfortably, unsure they'd heard correctly. The mother beside me inhaled sharply. My hands went numb around those white roses. Every eye in our section seemed to find me as she walked off stage without a backward glance, leaving me sitting there with my heart splattered across my shoes and my carefully wrapped flowers suddenly feeling like evidence of some crime I hadn't known I'd committed. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Around me, parents shifted in their seats, some clearing throats, others suddenly fascinated by their programs. The woman who'd been chatting with me earlier touched my arm gently. "Oh, honey, she's probably just overwhelmed," she whispered, her voice carrying that forced brightness people use when trying to smooth over disasters. "You know how emotional these big moments can be. She didn't mean it." The father behind me leaned forward. "Kids say things they don't mean when they're stressed. My son told me he hated me when I wouldn't co-sign his first apartment lease. Now he thanks me for it. Their words felt like band-aids on a severed artery, but I nodded anyway, clinging to their kindness like a lifeline. Maybe they're right. Maybe she just... But even as I grasped for that hope, something cold settled in my stomach. The way she'd looked at me when she said it, there hadn't been a trace of nervousness or regret, just satisfaction. She was walking down from the stage now, weaving through the crowd of other graduates receiving congratulations and flowers. I watched her approach, my heart hammering against my ribs. She'll apologize. She has to. This is all some terrible mistake. When she reached me, her expression was perfectly composed. Not embarrassed, not apologetic, just waiting. Sarah. My voice came out rougher than I intended. The parents around us had gone quiet, their conversations dying as they sensed the electricity in the air. What was that about? What did I do that was so terrible you had to say it like that in front of everyone? She tilted her head slightly, studying me with those eyes I'd once thought held all the warmth in the world. You really don't know? No, I don't know. The words burst out of me, and I immediately felt the heat of embarrassment as heads turned. I lowered my voice. Why didn't you talk to me about whatever this is? Why now? Why like this? A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Not kind, not warm, but something sharp and deliberate. Because I wanted everyone to know. Because I wanted it to hurt you as much as possible. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually took a step back, my hand instinctively moving to my chest. Around us, the carefully maintained pretense of not listening crumbled entirely. The mother beside me gasped softly. Someone behind us muttered something under their breath. Sarah? I searched her face desperately for any sign of the daughter I thought I knew. I don't understand. I love you. I've always loved you. That's your problem, Dad, not mine. The casualness of it, the way she said it like she was commenting on the weather, sent ice through my veins. This wasn't anger. This wasn't hurt lashing out. This was calculated cruelty, delivered with surgical precision at the moment when it would cause maximum damage. The people around us began to shift away, suddenly finding urgent reasons to check their phones or locate the restrooms. The woman who'd tried to comfort me earlier wouldn't meet my eyes. I could feel their discomfort radiating outward like ripples in a pond, could see them trying to process what they'd just witnessed. I stood there for another moment, staring at this stranger wearing my daughter's face, holding these white roses that suddenly felt like props in someone else's play. The auditorium continued to buzz with celebration around us, but our little bubble had gone toxic, poisoning everyone within earshot. This isn't real. This can't be real. But her eyes told me everything I needed to know. This was very real, and she was enjoying every second of it. I set the flowers down carefully on the seat I'd been occupying, the seat where I'd sat bursting with pride just minutes ago. My hands were steady, which surprised me. Everything else felt like it was dissolving, but my hands knew exactly what to do. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear her moving away, probably to find friends who would congratulate her on her big day. The thought made my chest tight, but I kept walking. This isn't happening. This isn't real. But with each step toward the door, reality settled deeper into my bones. My daughter hadn't just rejected me. She'd planned this moment, orchestrated it for maximum humiliation. And somewhere in the space between the flowers I'd left behind and the parking lot stretching ahead of me, something fundamental shifted inside my chest. The hurt was there, raw and immediate. But underneath it, growing like a seed in fertile ground, was something else entirely. Something that felt less like devastation and more like clarity. I heard her key in the lock at 2:47 a.m. I'd been sitting in my armchair, unable to sleep, replaying the events at the auditorium like a broken record. The sound of her stumbling slightly in the hallway, the soft thud of her purse hitting the floor, the familiar pattern of her movements. It all felt surreal after yesterday. When she appeared in the doorway the next morning, hair tousled and mascara smudged from whatever celebration she'd attended, she looked so achingly normal that for a moment I wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. Morning, Dad. Her voice carried that carefully casual tone people use when they're testing the waters. She padded to the kitchen, opened the fridge like she had 1,000 times before. I watched her pour orange juice, the domesticity of it making my chest tight. Maybe the parents at graduation were right. Maybe she was just overwhelmed. Sarah, my voice sounded foreign to my own ears. We need to talk about yesterday. She froze for just a moment, glass halfway to her lips. Oh. She set it down carefully, turned to face me with something that might have been remorse flickering across her features. Yeah, I might have said some things I didn't mean. You know how I get when I'm nervous. Might have. The careful qualifier hung in the air between us like smoke. Not an apology, just an acknowledgement that words had been spoken. Sarah, you didn't just say something you didn't mean. You deliberately humiliated me in front of an entire auditorium. You told me you wished anyone else had raised you. The words tasted bitter coming out. That's not nervousness. That's cruelty. She sighed, a sound loaded with the kind of exasperation usually reserved for dealing with difficult children. Dad, you're being dramatic. It wasn't that bad. Wasn't that bad. I stared at her, searching for any sign of the daughter I thought I knew. How can you say that? You destroyed me in public, and you're acting like it was nothing. Oh, please. The mask slipped then, revealing something harder underneath. You want to talk about being destroyed? Let's talk about what you did to Mom. The words hit me like cold water. What does your mother have to do with this? Everything. She spun around, suddenly animated with righteous anger. You think I don't know? You think I'm stupid? I know exactly what kind of man you are, what you put her through. I felt the ground shifting beneath me. Sarah, what are you talking about? Your mother left. She chose to leave. She had to leave. The words exploded out of her. Because of you. Because of your controlling, manipulative. Stop. My voice cut through her tirade. Just stop. You don't know what you're talking about. What happened between your mother and me has nothing to do with you. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Nothing to do with me? She's my mother. And she told me everything, Dad. Everything about how you tried to control her, how you made her life miserable, how you... She told you what? The room felt like it was spinning. Sarah, your mother walked out 5 years ago because she decided she wanted a better future. Her words, not mine. She left us, left you for some fantasy of a different life. How can you possibly take her side in this? Because I lived here. I saw what you were like. Her voice was rising, taking on that same edge it had carried at graduation. I saw how you treated her, how nothing was ever good enough. How you... Sarah, you were 17 when she left. You were a child. You don't understand what adult relationships... Don't you dare! She slammed her glass down so hard orange juice splashed across the counter. Don't you dare tell me I was too young to understand. I understood perfectly. And now I see you haven't changed at all. I stared at her, this stranger wearing my daughter's face, spouting poison that could only have come from one source. She's been filling your head with lies. They're not lies. Her voice dropped to something cold and certain. And yesterday, that was just me finally telling the truth about what kind of father you really are. The casual cruelty in her tone, the same satisfaction I'd heard at graduation, sent ice through my veins. This wasn't teenage rebellion or misplaced loyalty. This was something calculated, something that had been building for years while I remained completely oblivious. Sarah? I tried once more, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay calm. I love you. I've always loved you. Everything I did was for you and your mother. She looked at me with something that might have been pity. That's your problem, Dad. You think love excuses everything. The echo of her words from yesterday made my stomach drop. This wasn't spontaneous anger. This was rehearsed, planned. And somewhere in that realization, the last of my hope quietly died. I stood there in my own kitchen, looking at the daughter I'd raised, fed, protected, and loved with every fiber of my being, and finally understood that she saw me as the enemy, had always seen me as the enemy. The silence stretched between us, thick with years of misunderstood intentions and carefully planted poison. She stood there, defiant and certain, waiting for my response. But I had nothing left to give her, except the hollow ache where my heart used to be. 3 days after our kitchen confrontation, I made my decision. If Sarah wanted to see me as the villain her mother had painted, she could experience what that actually meant. I called the bank at 8 a.m. sharp. I need to suspend access on the secondary cards linked to my account, I told the representative, my voice steady as granite. Yes, all of them. The call came within an hour. Dad, what the hell did you do? Sarah's voice crackled through the speaker, fury barely contained. My card was declined at the grocery store. I'm standing here like an idiot. You're 22 years old with a business degree, I interrupted, feeling oddly calm for the first time in days. You've made it clear I'm such a terrible father. Why would you want financial support from someone who traumatized you so badly? This is ridiculous. You can't just... Actually, I can, and I did. I let the silence stretch, listening to her labored breathing on the other end. But I'll tell you what, Sarah. You seem very certain about the kind of man I am based on what your mother told you. How about we go visit her together? Let's have an honest conversation about what really happened. The pause was telling. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost some of its edge. What do you mean? I mean, let's drive to her apartment right now and discuss this like adults. All three of us. You can ask her directly about these terrible things I supposedly did, and I can defend myself. Fair enough? Another pause. I could practically hear the wheels turning. Fine, she said finally, but this won't change anything. We'll see about that. The drive to Linda's apartment complex took 43 minutes of brittle silence. Sarah stared out the passenger window, jaw set in that stubborn line I remembered from her teenage years. But I caught her stealing glances at me when she thought I wasn't looking. Doubt, maybe, or just curiosity about what I thought this would accomplish. The building looked shabbier than I remembered. Paint peeling from the exterior, a broken fountain in the courtyard filled with brown water and cigarette butts. This is the better life she left us for. Linda answered the door in a faded bathrobe, her hair unkempt, eyes immediately widening when she saw us both standing there. Sarah? What? Michael, what is this? Her voice carried that defensive edge I remembered from our final fights. We need to talk, I said simply. All three of us, about the stories you've been telling our daughter. Linda's face went pale, then flushed red. I don't know what you're talking about. Mom. Sarah stepped forward, voice softer now, almost protective. It's okay. I told him I know about everything, about how he treated you. I watched Linda's face carefully as Sarah spoke, saw the micro-expressions flicker across her features. Surprise, guilt, then quick calculation. She was deciding what to say, weighing her options. Come in, she said finally, stepping aside. The apartment was cramped and cluttered, nothing like the beautiful home she'd walked away from. Stack of bills on the coffee table, dishes in the sink, air thick with cigarette smoke, and something that might have been disappointment. I settled onto the worn couch while Sarah chose a chair close to her mother. So, I began, keeping my voice level. Sarah seems to think I was controlling and manipulative during our marriage, that I made your life miserable. Why don't you explain to her exactly what I did? Linda's eyes darted between us, her hands twisting the belt of her robe. Michael, this isn't. No, Mom, it's fine, Sarah interjected, reaching over to squeeze her mother's hand. He needs to hear this. Tell him about the financial control, about how he never let you make decisions. Financial control? I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. Linda, you had access to every account. You made most of the household purchases. You chose our vacations, our cars. He's lying, Linda said quickly, but her voice wavered. You don't understand, Sarah. He was subtle about it. Psychological manipulation. Like what, specifically? I leaned forward, watching her face. Give me one concrete example. The silence stretched. Linda's breathing became shallow, rapid. Sarah looked between us, confusion creeping into her expression. The way you questioned every purchase, Linda said finally, always asking why I needed things. I asked because our budget was tight. The words burst out of me. You wanted to redecorate the living room every 6 months while we were trying to save for Sarah's college fund. That's not control. That's fiscal responsibility. You don't understand, Linda's voice rose, taking on that familiar whine. It wasn't about the money. It was about how you made me feel. Like I couldn't do anything right. Like I was stupid. When did I ever call you stupid? I turned to Sarah, desperate now. When did I ever speak to your mother with anything but respect, even when we were fighting? Sarah's mouth opened, then closed. I could see her trying to remember, sifting through memories that might not match the narrative she'd been fed. You were condescending, Linda pressed on, but there was desperation in her voice now. Always explaining things like I was a child, always thinking you knew better. Because you kept asking me to handle things. The frustration of 15 years of marriage came rushing back. The taxes, the insurance claims, the contractors. You'd say you didn't want to deal with it, then accuse me of being controlling when I took care of it. That's not how it happened. But Linda's voice was smaller now, uncertain. Sarah was staring at her mother with something I'd never seen before. Doubt. Real, genuine doubt. Mom, Sarah's voice was quiet, careful. What about when you left? You said he tried to stop you, that he made threats. I watched Linda's face crumble slightly. This was it, the moment of truth. He said I'd regret it, she whispered, because you were walking away from our marriage. I exploded. Because you were abandoning our daughter. I said you'd regret throwing away 17 years for some fantasy. It wasn't a fantasy. Linda's composure shattered completely. Derek loved me. He saw my potential. He was going to. Derek? Sarah's voice was very small. Who's Derek? The color drained from Linda's face. In her desperation to defend herself, she'd revealed what she'd clearly never intended to share. The man she left us for, I said quietly, watching Sarah's expression. The one who promised her a better life and then dumped her 6 months later. Shut up, Linda whispered, tears starting to flow. Just shut up. Mom? Sarah's voice was breaking. You left because of another man? You told me. You told me Dad was. Your father was never enough. The words exploded out of Linda like poison. Never ambitious enough. Never exciting enough. Always so steady and predictable and boring. I wasted my life on him, and he cost me everything. The apartment went dead silent. Through the thin walls, I could hear a television in the next unit, canned laughter from some sitcom. Sarah sat frozen in her chair, staring at her mother like she was seeing her for the first time. So you lied to me, Sarah said finally, her voice hollow. All these years, you made me hate my father because you were... What? Embarrassed. I didn't lie. Linda was sobbing now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. He did hold me back. He did make my life small and ordinary. If he'd been different, if he'd been more like Derek, I asked quietly, the married man who told you he'd leave his wife and then disappeared when things got complicated? Linda's sobs intensified. Sarah looked like she might be sick. Sarah, I said gently, your mother made her choice. She chose to leave, chose to believe someone else's promises over the life we built together. And when that fell apart, she chose to make me the villain rather than take responsibility for her decisions. You were supposed to fight for me. Linda screamed suddenly, her grief transforming into rage. You were supposed to come after me, prove you cared. I did care, I said, exhaustion creeping into my voice. But you made your position very clear. You wanted something I couldn't be, someone I wasn't. Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. For a moment I thought she was going to leave, but instead she turned to face me, her expression hard. Okay, so maybe Mom exaggerated some things, she said, her voice carefully controlled. But look at her now, Dad. Look at this place. She gestured around the shabby apartment. She's living in squalor, and you don't care. I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. Sarah, she chose this. She left us for another man. But she's still my mother. Sarah's voice rose. And you're doing well living in our beautiful house while she's this. You could help her, but you choose not to. That's exactly the kind of man she said you were, cold, unforgiving. Cold? The word hit me like a slap. Sarah, she abandoned our family. She poisoned you against me for 5 years. Why would I? Because she's struggling, Sarah interrupted, moving closer to her mother's couch. Maybe she made mistakes, but she's paying for them now. And you, with all your principles and your righteousness, you just watch her suffer. I felt something break inside my chest. Sarah, she's not my responsibility anymore. She made that very clear when she left. Exactly. Sarah's eyes flashed with something that looked almost like victory. She's not your responsibility. She's nothing to you. Just like I said at graduation, you don't know how to love people without conditions. That's not. I started, then stopped. The trap was closing around me, and I could see it now. No matter what Linda had admitted, no matter what lies were exposed, Sarah would find a way to make me the villain. She's a stranger to me now, I said quietly, the truth of it settling in my bones. Yes, that's exactly right. Sarah nodded, as if I'd just confirmed everything she believed about me. Then you should go, Dad. I'm staying here with Mom. She needs someone who actually cares about her. I looked between them. Linda still sobbing on the couch, Sarah standing protectively beside her like a guard dog. Mother and daughter, united in their shared conviction that I was the source of all their problems. Of course you are, I said, my voice hollow. Of course. I walked toward the door, feeling the weight of their judgment pressing down on my shoulders. Even with the truth laid bare, even with Linda's lies exposed, they had found a way to make it my fault. Some patterns, I realized, were stronger than facts. The call came at 7:30 that evening while I sat in my kitchen, staring at the same cup of coffee I'd been nursing for 2 hours. My father's number flashed on the screen, a man who rarely called unless someone was dead or dying. Michael. His voice carried that familiar authority that had shaped my childhood. We need to talk. I already knew why he was calling. Sarah got to you first, didn't she? A pause. She's upset, son. Says you've cut her off completely, that you're refusing to help Linda. Did she tell you what she said at graduation? What she's been saying to me for days? My voice was steady, but something cold was building in my chest. She mentioned there was an argument. Dad. She told an entire auditorium that she wished anyone else had raised her. She spent the last week making it clear that I'm a terrible father based on lies her mother fed her. And when I proved those lies wrong, she decided I was still the villain for not financially supporting the woman who abandoned us. The silence stretched longer this time. My father was processing, weighing decades of knowing me against whatever sob story Sarah had spun. Michael, he said finally, his voice softer now. I know you're hurt, but she's your daughter, your only child. Don't you think you're cutting with too sharp a blade here? Too sharp. The phrase hit me wrong, stirring something that had been simmering since I'd walked out of Linda's apartment. You know what, Dad? For 22 years, I bent over backward for that girl. I worked overtime to pay for her dance lessons, her summer camps, her college. I was there for every scraped knee, every heartbreak, every achievement, and the moment she got what she needed from me, that diploma, she decided to destroy me publicly for sport. Son, no, let me finish. My voice was gaining strength, clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. She's made her choice. She wants to live with her mother, wants to believe I'm some kind of monster. Fine, but I won't be someone people wipe their feet on. Not anymore. Not even if it's my own daughter. Michael, you're talking about cutting ties with your child. I'm talking about accepting reality. I stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked the backyard where I'd taught Sarah to ride a bike, where we'd had countless barbecues, where she'd once told me I was the best dad in the world. She's chosen her side, Dad. She's chosen to believe the worst about me, despite everything I've done for her. So now she can live with the consequences of that choice. Another long pause. When my father spoke again, his voice carried a weight I'd never heard before. This isn't who you are, Michael. You're angry, and you have every right to be, but don't make decisions you can't take back. Maybe this is exactly who I am, I said quietly. Maybe I've been too accommodating, too forgiving, too willing to let people treat me like garbage because we share DNA. She's your daughter. She was my daughter. Now she's just someone who used my love against me and threw it back in my face. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, but also liberating. She wants independence. She wants to support her mother. Let her figure out what that actually costs. Sarah called 3 hours later, her voice tight with forced confidence. Dad, I'm moving in with Mom. Since you clearly don't care about either of us, we'll take care of each other. I could hear the challenge in her tone, the expectation that I'd panic, beg her to stay, promise to do better. The old me might have. That's your choice, I simply. Silence. She'd been prepared for anger, pleading, emotional manipulation. My calm acceptance clearly threw her. What? You heard me. You're an adult. You can live wherever you want. Dad, I'm serious. I'm packing my things tonight. Okay. I kept my voice neutral, almost disinterested. I'll leave some boxes by the garage if you need them. More silence. I could practically hear her recalibrating, trying to figure out why this wasn't going according to script. You're not going to try to stop me? Why would I? You've made it very clear how you feel about me. Why would I want someone who despises me living in my house? I don't. She caught herself, but not quickly enough. For just a moment, her mask had slipped, revealing something that might have been uncertainty. Sarah, you said at graduation that you wished anyone else had raised you. Yesterday, you told me I'm cold and unforgiving. Today, you're choosing to live with your mother rather than your terrible father. I'm simply accepting your decisions at face value. But this is my home. The vulnerability in those 4 words almost broke me. Almost. But then I remembered the satisfied cruelty in her voice at graduation, the way she'd savored my pain, the casual dismissal of every sacrifice I'd ever made for her. No, I said quietly. This is my home. You've made it clear you don't want to be my daughter, so you can't have it both ways. She was crying now, though trying to hide it. You're kicking me out? I'm accepting your choice to leave. There's a difference. Dad, please. Sarah, you're 22 years old with a business degree. You've told me repeatedly that I'm a failure as a father. Now you get to prove you don't need me. I paused, letting that sink in. The boxes will be by the garage. Take whatever you want that's yours. I hung up before she could respond. 20 minutes later, I heard her car in the driveway. Through the window, I watched her load box after box with sharp, angry movements, occasionally stopping to wipe her eyes. She was putting on a show, making sure I could see her righteous indignation from inside the house. When she knocked on the door one final time, I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. She stood there with red-rimmed eyes and her chin raised defiantly. I'm leaving now. Drive safely, I said. She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. That's it? That's all you have to say? What else is there? You could apologize. You could admit you were wrong. You could. Sarah, I interrupted gently, you've spent a week telling me exactly what kind of man you think I am. I'm simply giving you what you asked for. She stood there for another moment, searching my face for something. Regret, pain, a crack in my composure she could exploit. But I'd found something in myself over these past hours, something that felt like steel wrapped in velvet. Fine, she said finally. Fine. Don't come crawling back when you realize what you've lost. I watched her drive away, her car disappearing around the corner that led to her mother's broken-down apartment complex. The house felt different with her gone. Not empty exactly, but clean, like a fever had finally broken. For the first time in weeks, I poured myself a real drink and sat in my armchair without the weight of someone else's expectations pressing down on my shoulders. Sarah had wanted to see what kind of man I really was when pushed to the breaking point. Now she was about to find out. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 3 weeks after Sarah had slammed my front door for what I thought would be the last time. I almost let it go to voicemail. Her name on the screen no longer triggered the immediate worry it once did. But something in the late hour, the unusual timing, made me answer. Dad? Her voice was small, stripped of the righteous anger that had characterized our recent conversations. Can we talk? I set down the book I'd been reading, something I'd started doing again in the evenings, luxuries of quiet time I'd forgotten I enjoyed. It's almost midnight, Sarah. I know. I'm sorry. A shaky breath. I think I owe you an apology. Think. Not the most promising start, but I'd learned to listen for the spaces between Sarah's words. Go on. You were right. About Mom, about the money, about... Another pause, longer this time. About everything. I closed my eyes, feeling a familiar ache bloom in my chest. Part of me, the father part that would probably never fully die, wanted to tell her it was okay, that we could fix this. But I'd learned something about myself in these past weeks. Something about the difference between love and enabling. What happened, Sarah? The story came out in fragments. The rent on Linda's apartment had gone up. The utilities had been shut off twice. Linda had spent the money Sarah earned from her new job on clothes and dinners out, convinced that investing in herself was more important than paying bills. There had been fights, screaming matches that ended with Linda playing victim and Sarah feeling guilty for questioning her mother's decisions. She manipulates everything, Dad. Everything. I try to talk to her about budgeting, about priorities, and somehow I'm the bad guy. Somehow I'm being controlling, just like you were. Her voice cracked. But you weren't controlling at all, were you? You were just responsible. The validation I'd been craving for years sat heavy in my stomach, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like watching someone else's child learn a lesson that should have been taught with love, not lived through pain. Sarah, I was so wrong about you. The words rushed out of her now, desperate and raw. I let her poison me against you, and I said those terrible things. And I know I hurt you, but Dad, I need you to know that I see it now. I see what she is, what she did to us. To us, as if we were still a unit, as if the bridge wasn't already burned and scattered to ash. And what do you want me to do with that information? I asked quietly. Silence. Then, in a voice so small I had to strain to hear it, I want to come home. There it was, the moment I'd both dreaded and, if I was honest, hoped for. My daughter, humbled and desperate, asking for forgiveness and sanctuary. 3 weeks ago, I would have said yes before she finished the sentence. But sitting in my peaceful house, surrounded by the life I'd begun building without her chaos and contempt, I found I had a different answer. No. Dad, please. Sarah, do you remember what you said to me at graduation? Word for word? I was wrong. Do you remember? I pressed, my voice harder now. A long pause. I said I spent my whole life wishing anyone else had raised me. That's right. And when I tried to talk to you about it, tried to understand where that came from, what did you tell me? Her breathing was shaky now. That I wanted everyone to know, that I wanted it to hurt you as much as possible. Correct. I stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked my backyard. My space, my sanctuary that she'd rejected so completely. And when we went to see your mother, when the truth came out about her lies, what did you do? Dad, I know I. What did you do, Sarah? I chose her side anyway. The words came out as barely a whisper. You did. Even knowing she'd lied to you, even seeing the truth laid out in front of you, you found a new way to me, the villain, because I wasn't helping the woman who abandoned us, who poisoned my daughter against me, who destroyed our family for her own selfish reasons. I could hear her crying now, soft hiccuping sobs that once would have broken my heart. But hearts, I'd learned, could develop scar tissue. I know, she said. I know I was wrong. But Dad, I learned. I see her clearly now. I see what you were protecting me from all those years. Can't we just start over? Start over. As if 22 years of love and sacrifice could be erased and rewritten because she'd finally run out of other options. Sarah, do you know what these past 3 weeks have been like for me? Lonely? She offered, hopefully. Peaceful. The word hung in the air like a blade. For the first time in years, I've been able to come home without wondering what crisis I'd have to navigate, what mood I'd have to manage, what impossible standard I'd failed to meet. I've been reading again. I've been sleeping through the night. I've remembered what it feels like to not be constantly braced for the next attack. I won't attack you anymore, she said quickly. I promise. I've learned. Have you? Or have you just learned that your mother is worse than I am? Because those aren't the same thing, Sarah. The silence stretched between us, filled with all the words that had been spoken and couldn't be taken back. I love you, she whispered finally. I've always loved you. I know you do, in your way. I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. But Sarah, love isn't enough. Not when it comes with conditions, not when it can be turned on and off based on who's whispering in your ear, not when it's used as a weapon when things don't go your way. But I'm your daughter. Yes, you are. And that's why this hurts so much. I rubbed my forehead, feeling the weight of every word I was about to say. But being my daughter doesn't give you the right to abuse me. It doesn't mean I have to accept being your emotional punching bag. And it doesn't mean I have to pretend that respect and trust can be rebuilt with a single phone call. Then what do I do? Her voice was breaking, desperate. How do I fix this? I closed my eyes, remembering the eager little girl who used to wait for me by the door, who used to think I hung the moon, who used to tell me I was the best daddy in the world. That girl was gone, had been gone for years, maybe. The woman on the phone was a stranger who happened to share her DNA. You figure out your own life, Sarah. You learn to take responsibility for your choices without blaming other people for them. You discover who you are when you're not trying to hurt someone or get something from them. I paused, letting that sink in. And maybe, if you do that work, really do it, we can have a conversation in a few years about what kind of relationship might be possible between two adults who happen to share some history. A few years? Her voice climbed an octave. Dad, I can't wait a few years. I need. You need to learn the difference between want and need, I interrupted. You wanted to hurt me, and you succeeded. You wanted to choose your mother over me, and you did. Now you want me to pretend none of that happened because it's convenient for you. But what I need is to protect myself from being hurt that way again. The line went quiet except for the sound of her crying. I'm not abandoning you, Sarah, but I'm not rescuing you either. You're 22 years old with a college degree. Figure it out. Dad, please. Good night, Sarah. I hung up before she could say anything else, before the sound of her pain could erode my resolve. Then I turned off my phone entirely and sat in the blessed silence of my empty house. Outside, the world continued its relentless spin. Inside, I poured myself a scotch and returned to my book, to the quiet life I'd built in the aftermath of my daughter's betrayal. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was mine, clean and peaceful, and free from the constant threat of someone I loved using that love as a weapon against me. Some bridges, once burned, were meant to stay that way. And some lessons, no matter how painful, were exactly what everyone involved needed to learn. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. And as always, thank you for watching.